All right, let's talk about the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, a very unique team as they are, 3 years now removed from a Super Bowl, 2 years removed from having tied for the best record in football and losing in the last second of a divisional round game to the eventual Super Bowl champion, and last year winning the division with a sub 500 record. Now, in a post-Tom Brady world, there's a lot less optimism for Tampa Bay. But what I'm doing today is not predicting what I think will be the good and the bad, but more of a you're talking about what could happen if things go really well for them and what could happen if things go really poorly for them. What's the upside of this team and what's the floor of this team? How bad could it get? Let's just get into it. And obviously, the quarterback play is something that on paper doesn't look great. Baker Mayfield, one of the worst quarterbacks in the league last year, and, Kyle Trask is a second-round pick who they still haven't, again, second-round pick, but he was picked 64th overall. So not all second-round picks are the same. There's a difference between, 35th overall, like Will Levis, versus 64th, even though they both get considered second round. But still, he hasn't really shown much. I would say clearly the coaching staff isn't overly impressed with him if they went out and made sure they got Baker Mayfield to at least compete for that job. So on paper, it could be a disaster. And what's the downside? The downside is they get terrible quarterback play, which usually bad teams have terrible quarterback play. Like usually, if you have bad quarterback play, hard to do too much. You can do something with okay quarterback play, bad quarterback play, not really. To me, the clearest upside, which doesn't seem like something that we should just completely write off as a possibility, is if Baker Mayfield comes in and plays well. Like, that's possible. Again, Baker Mayfield, only a couple years removed from playing well. I guess 3 years now, so that feels a bit long, but there are valid excuses. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that he also hasn't played poorly on top of it, but 2 years ago, his last season with Cleveland, there was, he was banged up. I mean, he on a tackle after throwing an interception, got banged up, and while I think he made some mistakes outside of that, part of some of those mistakes might have been his arm talent wasn't quite as good, and he couldn't, make the throws he was used to being able to make. And then last year for Carolina, okay, listen, it was a disaster in Carolina. But maybe Mayfield is just the kind of quarterback who needs to be in a specific situation to succeed. This situation would probably be better for him because, Tampa Bay, they do have Mike Evans and Chris Godwin. Like, that already is good, and maybe Russell Gage can step up as well. If they're hitting their upside, those secondary weapons, Cade Otton as well, step in, and that's what can work for them. I also think that the offensive line is, they're relying a lot on Cody Mock and Luke Gadecki, on the right side, which could potentially be a mess. I mean, Gadecki did not play well his first year, I didn't think. And then, Cody Mock, a draft pick who I'm not overly optimistic about, but hey, drafting is not a fixed thing. There are some, you can be surprised by things. Also, Nick Leverett at left guard is, I thought he played fine at left guard, but as a whole, there's a chance that they could have 3 bad offensive linemen. So what's the downside? The downside is bad quarterback play and a bad offensive line, and it's Mike Evans and Chris Godwin trying to make up for it. But there is at least a potential answer to all of those things. And if Mock and Gadecki just play solid, Leverett plays solid, still have Jensen and Wirfs, 2 great offensive linemen, and then 2 great wide receivers with Godwin and Evans, and good quarterback play from Baker Mayfield. I'm not sure how much I trust Rachaad White, but he's fine. So, I'm not mad at that situation necessarily. It's nothing to write home about, I don't think, but I'm interested in seeing what he could do being, given a full year as the starter entering training camp. They also added Chase Edmonds, who could maybe do some things. There is some optimism for this offense to maybe be decent. I don't know if I would say it's going to be much more than like a top 15 offense, even in its best, most optimistic scenario. I think the downside, too, is you got to think about the coaching and how well, yes, Leftwich is gone, it's still going to be Todd Bowles running this team, and he's still going to want to run the ball a lot and help out his defense. I do think that best case scenario for the Buccaneers is that they're able to do an okay job at that. Worst case scenario is this is the worst offense in football. I legitimately think it has that potential, even with Evans and Godwin, to be the worst offense in football if the other stuff doesn't hit. Again, if this team is good, they have a decent offense and a great defense. And the great defense is certainly on the table. I mean, Kalijah Cansey, the rookie, he's going to miss a little bit of time, but should come in. And I really liked him out of college. Maybe he can step up. You got Vita Vea next to him, a healthy Shaquille Barrett. Maybe Joe Tryon-Shoyinka takes that next step. Anthony Nelson I like as a depth guy. Maybe Devin White finally kind of lives up to his potential. Levante David certainly is a great player. And then, Jamel Dean and Carlton Davis, really good corner duo with Anton Winfield and Ryan Neal at the safety position. And with Todd Bowles, who still does a great job at coaching defense, for all his faults, is still great at that aspect of the game and was great at it last year. If this could be a dominant defense and a decent offense, that's maybe the way they could get in and win the division, because it is a weak division. Now, what could they do once they get there? Again, you can talk yourself into maybe Baker Mayfield gets hot, right? I mean, you never know. If you get into the playoffs, anything can happen. I don't see this team having much higher of a ceiling than a playoff team. And even that feels like a bit pushing it. Again, I think they'd be a playoff team in a weak division would probably be this team's ceiling. The floor is that defense is fluky. One key injury happens and maybe they could be in trouble. I don't love the defensive line as it stands right now. While I have some players and some potential, will it all work together? I just don't know. I don't think Devin White is very good. And I think that losing Sean Murphy-Bunting at the slot corner position is going to hurt this football team. So I think all of that combined is a bit of a concern that I have as a Tampa Bay fan. So again, as a fan, I want to say, what is their ceiling Super Bowl? That's not realistically the case. I hope it happens. I hope I'm wrong. I think this team's ceiling, I do think there is a chance they could still be a playoff team if all things work. I do think the floor is a disastrous floor. I think it's possible this defense regresses because it's football. Defense does regress year in and year out. I don't think it's crazy to think that that could happen with Tampa Bay, because it's not. It's totally in the cards. It's totally possible. And if this offense is a disaster and only an okay defense and poor coaching, this team could be picking top 5 next year. That is absolutely, it's in the cards. It's a possibility. So that's the upside. That's the downside of a team that I still think is a fascinating team, and maybe, I don't know if people are, there is some upside of this team that maybe people aren't talking about, but I get why people aren't raving about this team, certainly even as a biased fan who, I joked with Kyle on the podcast about how everybody's hot take entering the preseason is that their favorite team is getting slept on, right? That's what everyone says. And so I also have that take for my team, of course, because I'm a biased Tampa Bay fan, but I don't know if we're getting massively slept on. At least that's what I think. What do you guys think? Let me know in the comments below. Always love hearing from you. And of course, as always, thanks for watching.